there, my name's Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and today me and my little girl Luna are here to do the quarter year crisis book tag. If you're new to this channel and you hear some snoring or grumbling in the background, don't worry, there's nobody snoring behind the camera. That is just this little girl. She's either here in the video with me or she's asleep in her bed nearby, and she can definitely be heard in the background sometimes. So the quarter year crisis. First of all, I know that we are already pretty well past the quarter of the year. In fact, we are moving rapidly towards the halfway point of the year, but I'm a little bit behind. And so I wanted to do this to just catch up, let you know how things are going, what I've been reading over the last few months while I have been focused on work priorities. And this seemed like a good way to kind of just recap gently. So first of all, the quarter year crisis book tag was originally created by Roisin's Reading, and I'm going to be linking their channel and the original video in the description below. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions. I did change the last two questions on this tag just to kind of fit what's been going on in my world a little bit. So if you've seen other versions of this video and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't remember it ending that way, that is why. Question number one is, how many books have you read so far this year? So I will say that I have read 43 books so far this year. I'm in the middle of my 44th book right now. That is a decent number. Unfortunately, for my own personal goal, it's not really where I need to be. I'm not going to get into detail with that too much because there's another question about that a little bit later in this video. So as of now, 43 books read. Question number two was, have you already found a book that you think might be a favorite for 2025? So I've been really impressed with the quality of my books across the board. I haven't read a ton of really bad books, and even the books that I didn't love as much as others have been consistently within the 3-star range. So that's pretty solid. I don't know if these particular books will end up as my favorites for 2025, but so far out of what I've read, my favorites have been Open Throat by Henry Holke. This is a really short, interesting little literary fiction novella, and it is about a mountain lion living in the Los Angeles hills. This is based on an actual situation that happened in Los Angeles a few years back. And basically this mountain lion has been personified, and we get the mountain lion's thoughts on its situation and like what's going on in its life. This was just such an interesting book. I picked it up purely on the cover. I was at the writer's block in downtown Las Vegas. I was perusing the different shelves. They always have such a great selection. I came across this like bright pink book with a big mountain lion with a mouth wide open called Open Throat. I picked it up. I kind of skimmed the back of it and I was like, oh, this is one of those books that's either going to be brilliant or going to be really, really bad. And I brought it home and honestly like devoured it in 1 or 2 sittings. It was just so thought-provoking and interesting and amusing. Being from Southern California, there was also a lot of things that like this book brought up that were just like memories of home or little things that like I think Southern Californians would maybe get a little more than people from other parts of the country. But all in all, if you're looking for a quick literary fiction read, something that's emotional but also not too heavy, I think that this would be a fantastic read. And my other favorite so far this year would be Isaac's Song by Dr. Daniel Black. A few years ago, I read Don't Cry For Me by Dr. Daniel Black. It was one of my best of the year. I have an entire video where I created a recipe based on this particular book, which you can find up here. And so Isaac's Song just came out this year, and it is the second part of that story. So Don't Cry For Me is essentially a letter from a father to his son, and Isaac's Song is the son's view of the same situation and like his relationship with his father. It's emotional, it's brutal, it goes to some very dark places. There are a lot of trigger warnings for like homophobia, sexual assault, violence, racism, all sorts of different things that are just going to make this a very heavy read. But the thing that I really appreciate about Dr. Daniel Black's writing is that he does it so seamlessly. He writes in a way that makes these difficult topics readable and approachable. It elicits the proper emotional response. His writing is just really lovely, and he brings these characters to life in a way that makes them feel so realistic and so well fleshed out. Definitely Dr. Daniel Black is an auto-buy author for me going forward. If you haven't read Don't Cry For Me and you haven't read Isaac's Song, definitely would recommend both of them. Read them back to back or spread them out a little bit because they are kind of heavy. Question number 3, any 1-star books or your least favorite book of the year so far? So I think I just briefly mentioned this, but I am really wildly impressed with with the quality of reading that I have done so far this year. I have not had any 1-star reads so far in 2025, which is fantastic. I actually really honestly haven't even had anything that was like solidly a 2-star. I think most of the books that I have liked a little less were in the 3-star range, and typically my biggest critique of them is that they felt kind of cliched or something that I've read before. Question number 4, what's your most read genre so far? So overwhelmingly, my most read genre so far has been literary fiction. Of the 43 books that I have read so far, 17 of them have fallen into the literary fiction genre. This is something that's really interesting to me because if you've been following my channel for a while, my reading progression has changed quite a bit over the years. I think I've always read across a wide variety of genres, but I think when I first started my channel back in 2022, I was reading a lot more of like horror, thrillers, fantasy, and then just sprinkling in some literary fiction here and there. And it's kind of almost flip-flopped. Now my primary genres seem to be like literary fiction, historical fiction, and then horror, but the horror that I'm reading is a lot more literary now. And then I kind of sprinkle in some fantasy, some sci-fi, things from a few different genres, and my nonfiction has really drastically increased as well. So I'm actually really happy about this. I think that there is so much value in all of the different genres. I'm not here to like tell you that one genre is more valuable than the other. Just that it's interesting to me to see kind of how things have changed based on like the books that I'm exposed to now. And then as I've gotten into YouTube and been exposed to much more international group of people and have access to like more reviews and things and getting to know people that have similar thoughts and tastes to me, it's just really expanded my reading quite a bit. I've also started following all of the main book prizes, and that's exposed me to authors that I had honestly never heard of prior to the last few years. So it's interesting to see how that reading has changed. Number 5 is a book that surprised you. So a book that surprised me was Fundamentally by Nussaibah Younis. So this was a book that was nominated for the Women's Prize, and then was shortlisted as well. I picked it up because of that. I'm trying to read the entire shortlist. And it was a book that I wasn't sure about. It's described as following a woman who essentially writes like a thesis on how to de-radicalize ISIS brides. And then due to the publicity and attention that that paper draws, she actually ends up getting sent to Iraq to try to do just that, to de-radicalize ISIS brides. And we're thrust into this world of bureaucracy and inept politicians and people just trying to make a reputation and not really focusing on what they're there to do. It was such a interesting book in that it was much funnier than I expected. It sounds like such a serious and deep, potentially really sad topic. And there are moments that it's very deep, very serious, and very sad. But there are also moments of great levity within this book. I found myself chuckling. I thought that the way that the inept bureaucrats were characterized was so well done. And even though I've never actually worked in this particular scenario, like even just traveling internationally, I've run into some of the types of people that you see portrayed within this book. So I just thought that this was really, really well done. It was not a book that I had on my radar, not an author that I was familiar with, not a subject that I had actually even ever considered reading within a book. And then I picked this up, like I said, because of the Women's Prize, and I just thought this was so, so good. This is a book that I would definitely recommend checking out. Even if you're hesitant about reading books from prize lists because you feel like they might be too pretentious or too literary, I found this one really, really approachable and really interesting. Question number 6 is a book that released in 2025 that you haven't read yet, but you want to. And honestly, I could list about 100 books right now. There are so many books that have released this year that look to be really, really good. And add that to my list of books from previous years and backlist books and all of that. And it's just a never-ending list. But off the top of my head, a book that I was very excited about, I actually picked up a copy of and have been dying to read, but just have not got to yet, is Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. This book is described as being about a disabled Nigerian-American woman who pens a wildly successful sci-fi novel, but as her fame rises, she loses control of the narrative. A surprisingly cutting yet heartfelt drama about art and love, identity and connection, and ultimately what makes us human. This is a story unlike anything you've read before. I've read quite a bit of Okorafor's writing, and in particular, I really love her Afrofuturistic science fiction. It feels like such a breath of fresh air within that genre. When I heard about this particular book, I was like, oh, this is going to be really interesting. I feel like it's going to have a lot of commentary on publishing, on the way that we view people, on the way that art and life merged together. It just has so much potential. I love the cover design. Just everything about this screams that this is going to be a book that I really enjoy. I'm trying so hard not to overhype it in my head, but I think that this could potentially be a 5-star read, and if it's done correctly, it could be one of my favorite books of the year. I have very high hopes for this. So out of that list of about 100 books that I've published so far this year, perhaps this is the one that I'm the most excited about. Question number 7 is one goal that you've made for yourself that you're succeeding at so far. So one of my goals for 2025 was to read a good amount of nonfiction. Last year, I wound up reading about 24% nonfiction for the entire year. And it was the highest amount of nonfiction that I've ever read in a single year. So excited about that. I had a great time with it. A lot of that was due to the Booktube prize because I judged several rounds of nonfiction. And so I got introduced to a lot of nonfiction books that just weren't even on my radar. And I enjoyed it so much that I pass that goal forward to this year as well. And my goal is to hit 25% nonfiction for the year. So far, I am sitting right at that 25% threshold. I have been reading a good amount of nonfiction. I am judging the current round of the Booktube prize in the nonfiction genre. So once again, I've gotten introduced to 6 new nonfiction books. But outside of that, I've also been doing a good job of making sure I read at least 1 or 2 nonfiction books every single month. And it's been working out really well for me. I have read some really good books. I think this goal, in fact, has gone so well for last year and so far this year that it might become just an annual goal to make sure that I'm reading at least 25% nonfiction. Question number 8 is one goal that you've made for yourself this year that you need to really focus on. So what I'm going to mention here is a goal, but not really a goal that I'll be super disappointed if I don't hit. I set myself a goal of reading 250 books this year. Last year I read 283. The year before that I read over 250 as well, I believe. And so I thought that setting a goal at 250 would be a comfortable place for me to come in at. But life, you know, when you make plans, sometimes life laughs at you. So just life has been busier than I anticipated this year going. And so my reading numbers are quite a bit down. In fact, if I was to hit the goal of 250 books that I set for the end of the year, I would need to read 42 more books than I've read at this moment. Currently I've read 43, so I would need to have about 85 books read to be on track to hit 250. Realistically, I don't think that I'm going to be able to catch up an extra 42 books on top of what I would need to read throughout the rest of this year to hit that 250 mark. So, you know, it is what it is. Like, I'm not going to cry or be upset at myself if I hit 200 books instead of 250. How crazy would that be? I'm just super happy at the end of the day that I have still maintained some time to read and to listen to audiobooks. At the end of the day, is it that important? Question number 9 is one that I added on for myself, and I added on any YouTube specific goals that you need to pay attention to. And I had set a goal at the beginning of the year to post consistently on YouTube. Not to focus on posting as many videos as possible, but just to focus on making sure I get up content consistently across the board. My hope was to get up at least 1 video a week. Let's just be real. I have failed miserably over the last few months. And I'm finally in a place where things are starting to even out a bit. We've kind of settled into a new routine at home to compensate for this busyness. My work is starting to like even off as I've gotten through like the crisis mode of taking over new businesses. And now hopefully I will be able to maintain a more steady schedule. Again, my goal is just to get up consistent videos. At this point, I'm not even gonna say once a week. I just wanna not go months on end without posting, and hopefully I'll be able to get up content a little bit more frequently for you. And question 10 was a question that I added on, which was, what is your best nonfiction so far? Since I've been reading so much of it, I didn't want to leave that out. My favorite nonfiction so far this year has been Between Me and You by TaNehisi Coates. This is no surprise for me. I love Coates' writing, and I really admire him as an author and as a journalist. I had high expectations for this book, and it is one that lived up to that. This is essentially a conversation between a father and his son about the impacts of race on life. This is something that's very deep, thought-provoking, made me look at different situations in very different ways, and is basically what I've come to expect from Coates' writing. This is a book that I would highly recommend if you haven't read so far. So that is the end of the quarter year crisis book tag. Hopefully this was an interesting little catch up for you. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up, comment down below, and let me know how your reading has gone so far for the year. Do you have any favorites, any least favorites, any books that you think I would really enjoy? Please make sure you rec them below. And finally, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button down below, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss a video, and that way we can see each other again soon. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.